I am Howard Zinn, and I hope you'll join me in supporting the Liberty Tree Foundation, which is working towards a democratic revolution in this country. We are desperately in need, especially at this time of war and the concentration of wealth. We are in great need of a social movement today that would begin to move this country in the direction of peace and the direction of economic justice. Whenever we have had in the history of this country a need to remedy some terrible injustice, governments have not taken the initiative. Governments have very often been the obstacle. Black people learned this. Working people learned this. Women learned this. We have always needed, in order for change to take place, we've always needed it to come from below. We've always needed to create social movements of citizens who got together, who organized, who agitated, who educated, who protested, who committed civil disobedience. We have this experience in the civil rights movement and the anti-war movement, the women's movement. We've always needed organizations like this because we cannot depend on the institutions, on Congress, on the president, on the courts. We cannot depend on them to take the initiative in bringing about a just and peaceful society. The Liberty Tree Foundation, which I've only gotten to know recently, impresses me as a group with a lot of energy, with real commitment, a group that is not going to be swallowed up in one of the major parties, or a group that has independence of spirit, and that looks for fundamental change in this country. And I've read its publication. It does good work. I hope people will support it. You know, elections in this country, unfortunately, have not contributed a lot to democracy. We have not really had free and democratic elections, although we're always calling for free elections in other countries. Our elections have been dominated by the two parties who very often have acted as one party, both parties being subject to the power of corporate wealth. And the electoral machinery itself has been controlled by money. And the regulations in the various states are such that independent political movements are not given a chance to compete. And so we very much need electoral reform in this country. We need to do away with the Electoral College. We need to give third-party candidates an opportunity to debate with the major party candidates. We need to equalize the funding resources for all the parties. In other words, we need a truly democratic election process, which we don't have now. No, it's ironic that educational institutions in this country, which prides itself in being democratic, and educational institutions which teach about democracy are themselves not democratic institutions. Educational institutions in this country are run from the top down. The people with the most power are the people who should have the least power. That is, the people who have the most power are the trustees of the university, the administrators of the university. The people who should run the universities are the faculty, the students, the janitors, the secretaries, the people who work in the universities. And these are the people who are subordinate to the administrators and to the trustees. So we are very much in need of a democratization of institutions of education. I understand that the Democratizing Education Network is working assiduously to make education more democratic. One of the ways of making it more democratic is making it affordable to everybody. We shouldn't have a situation where money gets you an education and where lack of money prevents you from getting an education. So we ought to use as a model European countries where tuition is free. Anybody who wants to go to college should be able to go to college. So any movement in that direction, I think, should be welcome. It must be that education has a potential for democratizing the country because the powers that be, the political leaders, the corporate leaders, pay a lot of attention to the control of education, to the control of curricula, to the control of faculty, and the problem that students and faculty and workers in the university have is to really begin to dislodge the control that rich corporations have over the educational process. Democracy cannot come from the top. Democracy has to come from below. It has to come from the grassroots. It has to come from people living in neighborhoods, people living in cities. Cities themselves, instead of being subordinate to states or to the federal government, cities and towns themselves should become little nuclei of progressive energy. And they should be sending that energy upwards instead of simply being the recipients of policy made at the top. I remember that during the nuclear freeze movement of the 1980s, there were city councils all over the country by the hundreds that passed resolutions calling for a nuclear freeze. And only then did Congress begin to act, and the House of Representatives passed similar legislation. We have seen city councils in recent years, since the Bush administration passed the Patriot Act. We've seen city councils in large numbers protest against the Patriot Act, decide that they would not enforce the Patriot Act. So there's an enormous amount of democratic energy residing in cities, and they offer, I think, a hope for democratizing the entire society.